right, let's get down to some heavy-duty stuff now. China. What, are you obsessed with China, Mark? No, I'm not. But China is obsessed with us. And our buddy Gordon Chang, writing at the Daily Beast, and we really need to hear this. To gain advantage in the intensifying trade war with the United States, China threatened to retaliate against Apple Inc., with an incredible public statement. China is and I'm quoting, China is by far the most important overseas market for the U.S.-based Apple, leaving it exposed, this is the Chinese, if Chinese people make it a target of anger and nationalist sentiment. People's Daily stated in an article titled, Strong Sales of U.S. Brands, Including Apple, Give China Bargaining Chips and Trade Row. The article, reprinted from a sister newspaper, went on, quote, China doesn't want to close its doors to Apple despite the trade conflict. But if the U.S. company wants to earn good money in China, it needs to share its development dividends with the Chinese people. Sounds like Bernie Sanders. The article in the Communist Party's and therefore China's most authoritative publication added one more implied threat. Quote, it is impractical and unreasonable to kick the company out of China. But if Apple wants to continue raking in enormous profits from the Chinese markets amid trade tensions, the company needs to do more to share the economic cake with local Chinese people. As I said, that sounds like Bernie. In fact, that sounds like most Democrats. So they're now threatening Apple. This is why these international corporations that go into these autocracies and set up these companies and invest, in some cases, billions of dollars, and build these plants are fools. You can build them here, you can build them in allied countries, that's great. The law is unstable in these autocracies. One change in leadership, one change in the Politburo, something like this. Now they're threatening Apple. You're going to give us your technology, and you're going to give us a lot of your money. And unfortunately, Apple now, because it is sold out, is stuck. In a country filled with customers crazy for Apple products, writes Gordon Chang, the only way the American brand would become a target of ire is if the political leadership was determined to make it so, as Beijing has done with other foreign businesses. Chinese officials have organized protests against a host of Japanese companies, and more recently, the Lot Group, the South Korean retail and tourism conglomerate. The Communist Party has also gone after Apple before. In March of 2013, for instance, Chinese officials took a series of actions suggesting they were seeking to undermine the brand. Apple's long-term future in the People's Republic was engraved out long before President Trump challenged the U.S.-China trade status quo. Alan Tunnelson, a Washington, D.C.-based trade expert, told the Daily Beast, Beijing's economic game plan has always called for kicking out or marginalizing foreign companies as soon as Chinese entities could adequately create their own products and services. With several Chinese smartphone producers nearing full global competitiveness, Beijing had already been undermining the company that is Apple. But while official campaigning against Apple by Chinese ruler Xi Jinping had worked in the past, there's been a remarkable lack of patriotic sentiment, this time expressed against either the United States or Apple. Why? For one thing, there's a sizable group of elite Chinese who happen to agree with Trump, or at least with the actions of his administration. Quote, people I have spoken with in China universally acknowledge the U.S. is justified in launching the trade war, unquote, Charles Burton of Brock University told me. On just completed travel from one end of China to the other, Shanghai, Kunming, and Linyi, the noted Canadian China watcher heard people say that American charges of unfair trade practices and coercive or illegal acquisition of U.S. technology are fully valid. Burton noticed something else, also suggested by others in recent days. There is, he told me, a general consensus that Mr. Xi has brought shame on China by his dishonorable trade policies, which violate the core teachings of Confucian tradition, upholding honesty and openness in all dealings as the mark of the cultured and upright government official. But no, he's a communist. So should anybody be surprised? Not all observers have put this observation in the context of ancient philosophical thought, but there is around China an evident unease at flagrant intellectual property theft, especially now that Trump has made what looks like an uncompromising stand on the issue, although I just wonder how widespread that really is. At the beginning of this year, there was a general consensus in Beijing that Xi could manage Trump, that the Americans' China, China, China rhetoric was merely campaign trail blather. This view, at first, looked to be correct, given Trump's effusive words of Xi and following the Mar-a-Lago summit last April. Until recently, looked like Trump was following in the footsteps of Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama, who all talked tough on China as they sought office and then defaulted to decades-old engagement, quote-unquote, policy once entering the White House. That's changed. Academic Yang Jing of Beijing's Renmin University has since become a star in the Chinese capital because he did not dismiss Trump's trade rhetoric. And Xi Jinping is now under relentless attack for provoking the once sleeping Americans. Communist Party bigwigs are at this moment thought to be at their semi-secret annual retreat, where the new conventional wisdom is that party elders will chop China's once absolute supremo down to size. Well, this I have to see to believe, ladies and gentlemen, but there is hope. If Xi is in fact diminished, Apple, among other companies, will be safer. Xi is thought to be behind the plan to launch precision strikes on U.S. businesses. In other words, holding them as hostages. That brings us back to Apple. CNBC's Jim Cramer thinks Beijing will leave the company alone because attacking it would be playing with fire. Cramer therefore predicts Chinese officials will target some other companies first. But if Beijing goes after any American companies, it would more likely be an historic mistake that would warn others to stay away from China. As the New York Times reported, trade friction is already forcing multinationals to think of moving supply chains away from China. Xi's retaliation could get them to do more than think about it. That's what many in Beijing have been worried about after especially pugnacious comments from Xi late last June. The South China Morning Post quoted officials saying that targeting U.S. firms in China has never been in the cards. Therefore, the extortionist demands by the people daily looks like it will wound Xi Jinping and his China more than the United States and its iconic company. Well, time will tell. This is why I keep touting this Sunday show, because it'll blow you away, on Life, Liberty, and Levin at 10 p.m. Eastern, with Dr. Michael Pillsbury, who's been working on this and observing this literally for decades. And he will tell you what's going on here, and he will get behind the scenes, even of this article, and explain what's taking place, how China's doing what it's doing, and not just technically, psychologically and otherwise. So I'm strongly urging you to make sure, because it's Friday evening, you check out Life, Liberty, and Levin on Fox, 10 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Look, if you don't, it doesn't really affect me. I'm just saying I really want you to check it out, because you're going to hear people talking about this show during the course of the week. This I can promise you. China. China sent 6 warnings to a U.S. Navy plane operating in the South China Sea in international airspace, over international water. And they ordered the American crew, quote, to leave immediately and keep out. But the U.S. Navy aircraft stayed the course, insisting it was within its legal rights. Now, this incident follows a report from the Philippine government revealing that China has been sending out threatening radio queries to foreign ships and planes at an increased frequency. So our ships, our Navy, has not been affected because we won't listen to it. But you cannot miss what China's doing here. And the President of the United States is doing exactly the right thing. You know I'm a free trader, except when it comes to enemy nations. I don't view China as I view Canada. China's the enemy. We may not view China as the enemy, but China views us as the enemy. And they're prepared to steal all of Apple's technology and steal its money. And they've already stolen technology. I say to the president, keep pummeling China. They are a national security threat. And you'll know why, again, after the Sunday show, in so many ways. Their techniques and what they're doing. I mean, I learned things I had no idea about. None. It's just incredible what they're doing. And they are not leaving any stone unturned. Whether it's our educational system, whether it's our media, whether it's think tanks, whether it's civilian use of resources and technology, whether it's military use of resources and technology, militarizing space, geographically, creating new bases, working with other countries. They are on the move. And the reason is, as Dr. Pillsbury explains, they have within their own ranks said to themselves, a lot of this comes from secret information that's now public, legitimately so, not in any untoward way, that is in this book. And the communist revolution succeeded in 1949 in China. Well, their objective for the last several decades has been the world's number one superpower come 2049, their 100-year anniversary. And Dr. Pillsbury says they're well on their way. While our Congress fiddles, while we're focused on Russia, you can be focused on Russia, but not exclusively. While we've spent 10 years undermining the United States military, it's absolutely incredible. As we sort of self-implode, and they are on the march. And it's very, very dangerous. We'll be right back.